Hi everyone, it's Amy from Amy Kristin Photography, and I've made another video. In today's video I'm going to talk about white balance. What is white balance? You may be familiar with a white balance setting on your camera, but what exactly does it do? Maybe you don't know, maybe you do know. White balance is, it's actually not just white balance, it's kind of like color balance, but it's called white balance. What white balance does is that it's a setting in cameras that allows neutral colors to stay neutral. When you look at the world with your eyes, if you look around, no matter what, the walls in your house always look the same color to you. I mean, obviously if you have lights on or off, they might look slightly different, but you don't ever have to adjust the white balance in your eyes. Your brain basically does that. Your brain knows how to do that. In cameras, we actually have to tell them how to read white balance to make colors look correct overall under certain lighting conditions, or really under all lighting conditions. So how does that happen? Well, to give you a short backstory, light has temperature. I don't mean actual heat temperature, I mean color temperature. But light temperature is measured on a Kelvin scale, and the lower the temperature, the warmer the light. The higher the temperature, the cooler the light. And again, this doesn't have to do with actual heat temperature, but if you think about it, warm light is something like candlelight, something like sunrise, something like that. Those light colors actually tend to be very orange, orange or red or yellow, that you associate with something that's hot or warm. The higher you move up the scale, the cooler the light gets. Daylight is around 5,500 to 5,600 K. The scale actually starts down in the 2000s and goes up to about 10,000. Daylight is medium, it's about 5,500. The cooler the light gets, the higher the temperature gets. If you think about it, you know, daylight at noontime is a much cooler, bluer light than a sunrise light or candlelight. Then if you get even higher, you move into, say, maybe shade or cloudy, or even like really dusky, like right before dusk, you know, when the light is getting very, very blue or very cool. That's a higher temperature. So that's how light works. It's on a color temperature scale. So in your camera, there's a few different ways to set white balance. There's an auto white balance button on pretty much every camera, which means the camera is making the decision on what white balance your setting should be. I don't really like that setting, because what happens is the camera's making the decision. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it doesn't get it right. And the other problem is that if you're shooting a bunch of photos in the same or a similar scene, the camera can choose a different temperature every time. And that can be a pain in the butt to fix in post-processing. The second thing you can do is there are presets on your camera. You may notice that you have something like tungsten light, you might have fluorescent light, daylight, cloudy, shade, things like that. Presets are actually not too bad. They give you a really good range if you are in exactly or close to the type of light temperature that the preset says. They're at least a good start. I think that they're better than auto white balance. I just want to jump back and tell you that there is one time when I use auto white balance, and that is if I'm ever shooting sunrises or sunsets. The light temperature changes way too quickly during those types of scenes for me to really change the light temperature in the camera very well. And the camera actually doesn't do too badly with the temperature on those, so I use it then. But that's the only time. So the presets work, like I said, fairly well. One thing you may notice is that if you use the wrong preset under the wrong type of light, your photo may look way really weird. For example, if you have a cloudy white balance preset set, and you are actually under a fluorescent light, your picture may look way too warm. Or if you have, say, tungsten light set and you go outside and take a picture, your picture is going to look really blue. That's where the whole light temperature thing comes in. You need to balance the temperature of the light in your camera in order for everything to look right. It actually can be kind of fun sometimes when you know what you're doing to play with the wrong light temperature and just make pictures look really blue or yellow for funsies, but yeah. So beyond the presets, what else can you do? You can set a custom white balance. Pretty much all cameras have the option to do that. I like to do this especially in places where there's kind of like tricky lighting situations or mixed lighting situations. I actually do it sometimes if I take photos in this room, which I do occasionally, only because these walls are very brown and they kind of reflect these color casts onto people, and also depending on the type of lighting I'm using, whether it be natural light or studio light, I want to make sure that that's all corrected for. So I set a custom white balance from time to time. So how do you do that? There's a few ways. What I use the most when I set my custom white balance is an expo disc, which looks like this. Basically, this is something that you put on the front of your camera lens and you take a photo with it. And these things are balanced, so the photo that you take with it, it's basically balanced neutral. It is a complete neutral gray, or it's a neutral color. So even though the photo that you take with the expo disc on your camera might not look gray when you take the photo, what you have to do is you have to tell your camera that that really is gray. Because if you look at this, it's a grayish white. The photo that I take in this room may actually be like a pinkish yellowish brown because of the wall color, but I gotta tell the camera, no, this is actually gray, this is neutral. So once the camera knows that the color that it thinks is gray really is gray, you know, basically you have to tell it what's gray, so it renders everything gray. You can also use things such as a white balance card. You can have people hold up white balance cards. They're cards that are balanced. They're actually gray cards usually. They're called gray cards. They're a balanced neutral 18% gray. You can have them hold it up in the light source that you're using to take the picture, or you can even use a piece of like white paper or something neutral. If you know, in a pinch, have somebody hold that up, take a picture of them, continue to take your photos, and then when you go into either Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw after the fact, you can use your eyedropper tool to sample from whatever it is, the card, the paper, whatever, that you took that photo of, and it will recognize that that particular item is the neutral item in the scene that they want to balance all the other colors off of. There's other types of white balance targets as well. The last way that you can set white balance is you can actually use Kelvin itself. You can dial in a Kelvin temperature. Most cameras also have this feature. This is what I use for the most part. I actually use this mostly. Right now I pretty much only set a custom white balance in either tricky lighting situations or somewhere where I'm not sure what it's going to be. Kelvin I am pretty familiar with, and pretty much can easily dial it in. You actually will go into the Kelvin menu on your camera and you will enter the actual light temperature that you want. So if you go online and if you look up Kelvin white balance, you can actually find scales that tell you ranges of temperatures that you should use for different lighting situations. Usually when I'm outside, in day sunlight, anywhere from probably, like, it depends on the time of year, but 9 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, say in the summertime at least. I'll usually use about 5800. I like my photos a little tiny bit on the warm side. I don't like them too cool. It doesn't make it look really badly warm or anything. I actually think it looks normal to me. I think it looks like what the sunlight looks like, so it may just have to do with my camera sensor. Also, when I shoot with my studio lights, I actually usually use around 5500 because my studio lights are daylight balanced, meaning they actually put out the light temperature of daylight. So if I use that daylight 5500K in my camera, the white balance comes out spot on every time. And yeah, depending on whatever light situation I'm in, I don't know, whether it's shade, whether it's cloudy, whatever, I just dial it in. If you ever make a mistake, or you want a picture warmer or cooler, you can fix it in post-processing. You can make your white balance warmer or cooler. there's ways to do this in Lightroom, there's ways to do it in Adobe Camera Raw. You can either pick a preset out of those programs, or you can kind of dial it in yourself. One thing I will tell you is that white balance is way easier to fix in post-processing if you are shooting RAW rather than JPEG. It is extremely, 10 times, million times much easier to fix white balance on a RAW than a JPEG. If you blow white balance on a JPEG, I don't want to say you're out of luck, but you're going to have much less latitude in fixing it. There actually are some people who shoot RAW who just shoot auto white balance all the time just because they prefer to set it in post, because you can. It doesn't really, RAW file white balance, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because if you set a custom white balance, or if you use a preset, or if you dial it in yourself with Kelvin, it will take on the RAW file. It's just that you can change it really to whatever you want after the fact in post-processing on a RAW file, and you can't really do that on a JPEG. One other fun point that I wanted to kind of point out is that actually if you shoot Sony and you shoot Kelvin, because Sonys have an electronic viewfinder, basically meaning you're not looking through an actual optical viewfinder, you're not seeing through the viewfinder using the mirror and the lens, it's actually almost like a tiny LCD through the viewfinder. If you change Kelvin temperatures, you can actually see those temperature changes right through the viewfinder, which is really cool. On Canon and some Nikons you can see it if you use live view, if you change the Kelvin temp, but obviously if you're shooting through the viewfinder, that is not always what you want to do. You don't always want to hold the camera out and say, hey, is this Kelvin temperature what I want or not? I mean, that actually can be a good way to learn it, or to dial it in at first if you want to look at your LCD and see if if it's right, if it's spot on, because you can see it there if you throw the camera in live view just for a bit. But just something put out there for you Sony shooters. That's a plus. So that is all about white balance, some ways that you can set it and what it does. A lot of people have issues with white balance, their pictures being too warm or too cool, but if you understand how to set it, get good white balance to start with, I think that's one of the keys to a good photo. Good white balance and good exposure give you a good base to start out with, so you don't have to fix a lot of that stuff in post. Obviously Lionel wanted to be in this video. He wants to say hi, so he appreciates you watching this video today, and so do I. Thank you.